Hi, I'm J. Rachel Edden.
And I'm Miles Stokes.
And we're the hosts of Rachel and Miles Explain the X-Men, a weekly podcast all about the ins, the outs, and the retcons of our favorite superhero soap opera.
We're also the hosts of Rachel and Miles Review the X-Men,
which you're watching right now,
where we talk about the X books that come out each week.
This week we're looking at the books of February 3rd, 2016.
Just two of them.
Let's do this. First up, we've got Uncanny X-Men number 3, written by Cullen Bunn, penciled by Greg Land, inked by Jay Leiston, and colored by Nolan Woodard. This series is really growing on me. I think it was off to a rocky but interesting start, and with number 3, it's coming in as solidly good.
I would agree, which makes me happy because, we've mentioned how much we loved Cullen Bunn and Magneto, and this is that Cullen Bunn that we're seeing in this issue.
Yeah, this is an interesting hook. It's a really interesting team with a really interesting dynamic, and, and I know this is hardcore damning with faint praise, but I'm doing okay with Land on art for the most part. His Monet still kind of makes me want to punch a wall, but yeah, this is, the storytelling, the visual storytelling is decent, which I didn't see coming, and it feels weird praising someone to get up to a level that I would normally consider just, adequate. But it's nice, and it's nice having a book that exceeds my expectations, especially when my expectations are that I won't be able to enjoy it, because I have been, and it's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having art that doesn't get in the way of Cullen Bunn's writing, that's good, and I think you're right. I think Land is improving, and I've never personally been a fan of his art in the past, but I'm always happy to see people do better things, so kudos.
Yeah, I think that's something that people tend to sort of forget. It's something that I see brought up a lot with regards to Chuck Austen, who's now doing really awesome work in TV. And I think we sort of see, especially in publishing, we see getting professional work as an end in itself and kind of ignore the fact that writers and artists continue to develop not just more specific style, but skills.
Look at Walter Simonson's current series, Ragnarok, for a great example of that.
Although he was doing brilliant work pretty much out the door, so...
Oh, I know. But
now
it's brilliant with even more detail.
But it's nice seeing that, and it's really nice, honestly, seeing that in an artist who, while I'm still not a huge fan of his style, is someone who, for me, was previously a make or break to buying a book. I would skip series if Greg Land was drawing them. And if this is the direction he's moving in, I don't feel like that doesn't feel like as much of a cut and dried thing anymore. And that's really nice. Having more things that I like, having more things to like is really cool.
I fully approve of this attitude.
Right.
Yes. So let's talk about the book itself.
Let's do. Okay, so this is following this sort of, these are sort of the morally gray, or the morally grayer X-Men. It's Magneto, Sabretooth, Psylocke, Monet, who am I forgetting?
We have Phantom X and Mystique showing up now.
Yeah, they're not on the team yet. I don't know if they're actually going to be in the book. That part I thought was a little bit weaker, but the core group and the way they play off each other is really intriguing. This is also the series where the Apocalypse storyline, as far as I can tell, is building up, or at least the only one where it's even been teased, because we've got this group who are very obviously followers of Apocalypse, who are going around killing mutant healers.
Yeah, the Dark Riders.
Yeah.
Talking about the interesting team, for me, the star of this book, I would say, is Psylocke.
Yeah.
She's written in a fascinating way that we've really only seen recently, I think, by Rick Remender, for the most part. Mm-hmm. With a little bit of what Cy Spurrier did thrown in. And she also feels a little old school. She feels like the early British Psylocke I remember from, the mid to late 80s.
Yeah. Well, she's got elements of that. She doesn't feel like she's a throwback to that, though. Like you said, it feels like she's got, the Remender and Spurrier elements in there. Which is nice, honestly. Psylocke is a character who... she's been pulled so far from her roots and her past, and she's written in such a just wildly inconsistent way that having a more, integrated version is neat.
Totally agree, yeah. Now you mentioned you weren't so big on the Phantom X stuff at the end.
Yeah,
I don't know, I kind of like seeing Phantom X as a totally amoral thief. He does some bad stuff here.
I dig amoral Phantom X.
Yeah, and it's just a fun take on the character, especially after Cy Spurrier's X-Force.
Phantom X is another character who's been written wildly inconsistently, and there's not enough of him in here, I feel like, for me to say whether I like this version or not, and because we've gotten burned on so many previous ones, I'm really reluctant to go in expecting that this is going to be good just based on those few pages.
Yeah, fair enough.
I hope so. I have high hopes.
it's a less rocky start in some ways, I think, than Extraordinary X-Men, which for me, the first arc felt rocky. With this, we're still in the first arc. It's already picking up. So I'll be curious how that plays in trade paperback, for instance.
Can we talk about Magneto's costume for a minute?
Yes.
And how awesome it is? And how obviously evocative of all new Cyclops' costume it was?
Yeah, the black and red.
Not all new, Marvel Now Cyclops, sorry.
The black and red that Cyclops was wearing when he was a revolutionary.
The black and red and the lines of the costume.
Uh-huh.
Like, that's a really specific... I mean, it's close to the black and white Magneto, but I mean... Yeah, it's a Cyclops costume. It's got to be a callback to that.
Right. Well, especially with this big thing that Cyclops did. We still don't know what it was having happened. Magneto having gotten a lot harder. Partially the noodle incident. Yeah. Partially because of the Cyclops thing. Partially also presumably of Genosha getting messed up again. Poor guy. It makes sense.
Genosha cannot catch a break. We're almost there in the podcast, aren't we?
First appearance of Genosha will be the next Uncanny X-Men episode.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so excited about it.
A few weeks or so.
Genosha is terrible.
Oh yeah. But yeah, this book is starting to fire on more and more cylinders, which is awesome. Our second issue is X-Men, Worst X-Men Ever, number 5 of 5, written by Max Bemis with pencils and inks by Michael Walsh and colors by Ruth Redmond. So this is the last issue of the series, and it was what I wanted. Well, or rather, it wasn't what I wanted, it was what I needed. We're going to get like Dark Knight about this whole thing.
Oh, God.
So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and say...
Should I be worrying?
Probably. There's no way to talk about this issue without spoiling some stuff that happens in previous issues. So if you want to go into this series cold and you're watching these reviews... Which, honestly,
you kind of should.
Yeah. But anyway, just before...
You might want to skip ahead to pick of the week.
Right. That said, so this is an issue about what happens after the good guys lose. Mm-hmm. After the good guys irreconcilably lose in a way they can't come back from. This is a future where Professor X is dead and where a total jerk is running the entire world.
This is an extended joke about continuity that the entire series has been building up to.
Well, that too, but I think it really works on its own because this book is all about disappointment when it gets down to it. It's all about figuring out who you are in a world where you cannot win.
Well, it's not only that, it's all about inevitable disappointment, fated disappointment. It's about having the odds completely stacked against you from the start and finding it out at the end that it could never have been any other way.
Right. And so seeing a much older Bailey, a suddenly like almost middle-aged Bailey, although I feel like he is probably prematurely bald because he's Bailey and that's what would happen.
It seems really likely, yeah.
You know, just living in this world where his greatest rival is now the Emperor, effectively. Mm-hmm. And having things be so far gone that he doesn't even see a point in rebelling, that he just goes to this guy's party anyway, even though he knows he only got invited to mock him.
And that's the collective level of resignation just across the board.
Yeah, it's kind of brilliant. And yes, it's very depressing to read, but this book has also been all about figuring out how to have an identity when you're a born loser. How to make it somehow mean something even when it means nothing.
Well, kind of. We've mentioned before that this feels like a grown-up cynical game of playing What If I Were on the X-Men? And this issue definitely feels like the climax of that game. Just the, where the failed dream character grows up into a failed dream. And what I found most interesting about it wasn't Bailey, it was Miranda. Yeah. Miranda is a character who's functionally omnipotent, who's introduced earlier in this series, and in this issue, she's basically revealed, her superpower is basically Marvel timeline. It's Marvel editorial, and it's the sliding timeline.
Yeah.
She's been rewriting the universe around superheroes, keeping Tony Stark 30 for 60 years, bringing people back to life. She's basically been editorial fiat.
Which is kind of great. And she becomes a non-character because she's so powerful. Mm-hmm. In the inverse of Bailey being inevitably the main character because he is the most powerful of any of them in a very particular way. So it's a fascinating look at something we don't usually see, and because this is a pocket universe, because it's an alternate timeline that's not going to affect the main Marvel universe, Max Bemis can do whatever the hell he wants. He can show us this and have it have real consequences for the characters involved.
This is frankly something I'd like to see a lot more of. I think you had mixed feelings about Marvel continuing alternate timelines in a series like this, like X-Men 92.
Well, X-Men ones anyway.
Secret Wars.
Yeah, because I want more X-Men main universe.
I love that. Because part of what makes the X-Men interesting, part of what makes any of those ongoing superheroes interesting, is that we've had the same characters around for more than 50 years. That is nuts. Mm-hmm. They've gone through hundreds of creative teams. They've changed with the times. They've adapted. They've evolved. There have been new and fresh takes on these, basic core concepts. And what makes them interesting to me is the variation in that. It's the ways that they reflect the eras where they're being written in, the audiences they're being, written and drawn for, the sensibilities of those times. And seeing that, fractalize and fracture further is awesome. Like, that's what I feel like big shared universe legacy superhero books should be doing. Having a wider range of stories, having more options, trying to create and maintain central continuity when you've been around for that long, when you have that much going on, and when you have that wide a universe to draw from, for me feels like an exercise in futility, and one that frankly gets in the way of stories.
I think sometimes that can be the case, and I think the way to do it is to keep the main continuity going, have most of your books that, but every once in a while do something like this. Do just an experiment. Let somebody play in a really weird way that no one's played before.
Or just regularly do this. Have one or two ongoings that are separate. Make what if, a line. Make it a whole premise in a set of books.
That could work too. But regardless, Worst X-Men Ever, you should read this series. It's 5 issues. It's self-contained. It's already out on digital, and it'll be out in print soon. If you're an X-Men fan, especially if you're an adult X-Men fan who has spent a lot of time with these characters, it's a really fascinating examination of what power fantasies are, why they don't work, and more importantly, why they do.
And what defines the X-Men as a series, as a franchise, and as a legacy.
That's 2.
So what's our issue of the week?
So initially our issue of the week was actually going to be Uncanny X-Men number 3.
But then we recorded the review for Worst X-Men Ever number 5, and we realized that that it really had to be that one.
Yeah. Now again, all props to Uncanny X-Men number 3. The series is rapidly increasing in quality, and I think it's going to turn into something really cool. But Worst X-Men Ever it's something special. It's unique. We have not seen this stuff done before, and it's done in a really interesting, thought-provoking, enjoyable way. Seriously, you guys owe it to yourselves. Read the series.
Oh, I'm just a really big sucker for meta commentary.
Well, there is that.
You do you.
What's our panel of the week?
Our panel of the week is also from Worst X-Men Ever number 5, and we picked this one. Not a lot is going on in there, but it highlights, I think, an aspect of comics art and comics storytelling that gets overlooked a lot, which is the inking. This is a really well-assembled panel, and a big part of that is the inking, is the line quality and width, the level of detail. It's just, it's a well-inked panel, and that conveys a lot, and it's a big part of how the panel works. So props.
That's it for this week. Thanks for watching.
If you like what you've seen here, check out our podcast, Rachel and Miles Explain the X-Men. New episodes go up every Sunday at rachelandmiles.com, also on iTunes and Stitcher. What have we got for them this week?
So this week it is The Brood, making their return in the glorious Australian era of Uncanny X-Men. 3/4 of the story is a really good, creepy horror story, and the rest is a bunch of D-list supervillains being ridiculous.
And it's all Havoc's fault.
It's all Havoc's fault. He was supposed to tell the X-Men about that 20 issues ago.
He really was. Well, that podcast, these video reviews, and everything at rachelandmiles.com are brought to you by our Patreon subscribers. We are an entirely listener-supported project, and this is entirely made possible by the folks who've subscribed on Patreon. You're awesome. You're fantastic. If you're not one of those people, but you would like to be, which you totally should, you can do that at the link either above or below this video, depending on where you're watching it.
Yes, indeed. In the meantime, we will see you next week with even more X-Men for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, probably.
Which is kind of awesome.
Depending on how long they last.
I just got really depressed by Worst X-Men Ever number 5. Now nothing
Really?
seems to matter.
You want a sailor hat? I've got 4 next to the desk.